I am Tenitra Batiste, and it looks like the triumvirate is set.
I'm Aaron Freeman, and they say in the NBA you need a big three to win a championship, and I hope maybe that applies in the NFL as well.
I'm Jarvis Davis, and the Atlanta Falcons had their guy all along.
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
The Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman and Locked On analyst Jarvis Davis. Senior Falcons reporter Tori McElhaney will be back with us next week. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So the Falcons made a lot of moves the last few days. We'll give you our thoughts on some key ones. Also, Ra has returned to familiar surroundings. We'll talk about if it's a good fit or the best fit for him. And speaking of all-star events, can the Pro Bowl games be fixed? We'll discuss. But first, let's talk about the final piece in the puzzle for the Falcons. Now, Jarvis, things got a little interesting last week because we found out the Texans assistant general manager, James Lifford, was a finalist along with Ian Cunningham for the general manager role for the Falcons. And we literally talked about the fact that, does that mean that Ian Cunningham is no longer the front runner? Is this a 50-50 race? Is it 60-40? What is this race going to turn out to be as the Falcons look to, as I mentioned, complete their triumvirate? But ultimately speaking, it got to Ian Cunningham. It came down to Ian Cunningham, and he was announced as the Falcons general manager. So first off, in your opinion, why did the Falcons ultimately go with him?
I think when you talk about what's important and when you're going through the hiring process, it's about relationships, guys that you're connected to. They hired Matt Ryan because of he knows ball, and he understands what it takes or what it looks like to have success when someone has successfully built a team around you. And when you look at where Ian Cunningham was in Chicago and Ryan Poles, it took some time to get it going, but he's definitely on the right track up there in Chicago. So hey, let me look to my homeboy off the field, my right-hand man, to see, hey, let me go talk to his right-hand man. Let me go talk to him and say, hey, what do you think about Ian coming down here and being our guy? And I think that as you go through the process and you go through all of these candidates, and that's why I said when we talked about, Lifford seemingly picking up steam late in the process, I think that even though they had their guy from the beginning, which I said, I do feel like they said they had to give a guy like Lifford another shot because I'm assuming that he impressed in that interview. So like, okay, let's bring this guy in and kind of see where his head is at. Because they could have easily hired Ian Cunningham off the rip because of they didn't have to, go through the whole Rooney Rule process because of, how the triumvirate, as you put it, is structured. So I think that you can appreciate that. Them going through the process and vetting this bad boy out and seeing what else is out there and see if someone can, unseat him from that position. And I think that, I think Ian Cunningham is a solid hire overall.
Yeah. And a couple of things there, like you mentioned, being able to rely on Ryan Poles, who is a close personal friend of Matt Ryan's, to say, hey, is Ian Cunningham really ready for this job? And to be able to get the thumbs up is important because in your first space within that front office, your first job outside of broadcast and outside of being on the field, you want to make the right hires and you want to be able to rely on people who've done this job, who've done that job, and who've done that job very, very well. Like you said, we've seen the ascent of the Chicago Bears in recent years, the crafty moves that they made midseason, the crafty moves that they made free agency, and the moves that they made in the draft, right? But on that same token, you could see how James Lipford could enter the conversation and enter the chat, because the Texans also have made some really, really great moves in the draft and in free agency. So kind of looking at those guys and seeing the process that Matt Ryan came to, I think you can also appreciate the fact that he didn't just say, okay, I'm going to anoint Ian Cunningham as a general manager. It seems like he truly took the vetting process seriously, interviewed a number of candidates over a couple of days, even mulled over, because remember, Aaron, we were talking about the fact that, we thought that they would announce that the general manager, who the general manager was, maybe like late Monday evening or first thing Tuesday morning, so that the press would be introduced to both Kevin Stefanski and the GM at the same time. But it looks like they were more concerned about not having that GM be introduced to us, or even necessarily having that GM in place for Senior Bowl week. They just wanted to get it right and make sure that they truly vetted the process. And you can respect that. And also, Aaron, like Jarvis said, in terms of the Rooney Rule, you'd already had candidates of color who were strongly considered for the top position, which was head of football. So it wasn't necessarily any case like that where you had to bet or consider as a result of the Rooney Rule. But ultimately, in your opinion, all things considered, did the Falcons ultimately, why did they go with Cunningham?
Yeah, I think, as you guys have both touched on, it's kind of a who you know business in the NFL.
Yes, it is.
And as you mentioned, with Matt Ryan being a first-time NFL executive, getting that GM hire and getting somebody that you're comfortable and connected with makes a ton of sense. And obviously, through that connection with Ryan Poles, there was a strong connection with Ian Cunningham. And I think that's ultimately why the Falcons went there. But as you both mentioned, the Falcons wanted to do their due diligence because of how important that job is going to be to getting this team on the right track and making sure that they did a thorough job talking to many of the top, GM candidates in this cycle that were available, and making sure, okay, Ian went through, the president of football, interview process, and now through the GM interview process. And, ultimately you assume that they went with the best candidate, right? We'll give the Falcons the benefit of the doubt in that regard, that Ian Cunningham clearly emerged as the best candidate for the Atlanta Falcons. And I think ultimately that's why they chose him through this process. But yeah, it's that combination of familiarity, which breeds trust, but also, due diligence. I think the Falcons potentially got this right.
Yeah, I think so as well. And again, it's one of those where we will see. We're kind of making the decision based on what's on paper, but it sounds like Aaron says, hey, Cunningham was the right choice. Do you feel the same, Jarvis? Right choice, best choice for that position?
Yeah. When you think about his track record, what he was able to do with the Baltimore Ravens, obviously Ozzie Newsome is probably one of the most storied, successful general managers that this league has seen. Just the consistency with personnel and being able to really just always find those gems in the draft. I've always admired what Ozzie Newsome has done. And then you have Howie Roseman. Hey man, I'm just going to draft Georgia players. I'm good. Analytics tells me that they are really good. They have a good head coach. He's going to prepare them to play in the NFL, and then we're just going to go with that. And then we'll fill in the gaps in other spots. So, and then, with working with Ryan Poles, hey man, sometimes you got to take a chance. Sometimes you got to not necessarily kind of go against the grain on purpose, right? Like if you're feeling a certain type of way, you have that conviction, like Terry Fontenot used to talk about. I feel like Terry went too much with conviction on certain moves sometimes, and that ultimately what got him, up out of here. But hopefully he can take all of those things that he learned working up under these guys, these GMs, and kind of make it his own. And I think that when you have a guy who had those experiences, throughout those team building processes, I feel like, hey, he has to be the right guy because, that's what you do. You hire guys who had success working up under people who are who's been consistently successful throughout their entire careers.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call out to Aaron that Jarvis makes, just in terms of it's not just about the experience and the exposure that Ian Cunningham had with Chicago that makes him the right fit or a best fit for this job, but it's all of the stacking on of other organizations that he was a part of. And we've seen what those front offices were able to do, right down to hoisting Lombardi trophies, if you will. So when you look at Cunningham, I think you said it, right choice, best choice.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, time is going to tell. We'll be sitting here, 3 years from now and being like, oh, these moves worked out, because like at the time when we hired Terry Fontenot, we were like, oh, yeah, Terry Fontenot was the best choice. And then you look back and you're like, maybe Brad Holmes would have been the better choice. But like, I think there's no reason to sort of doubt this at this point in time, given the background that Ian Cunningham has, going back, as Jarvis pointed out, with the Ravens and the Eagles. I don't know if I agree with Jarvis that the Eagles' success is solely owed to them drafting Georgia players, because I feel like, they were competing at the highest level, winning Super Bowls even before they started doing that. But, if you want to go down that road, these last couple of years, certainly it's been a contributing factor to their success these last few years. But I think both of those teams are, when you look at the Ravens, you look at the Eagles, in addition to teams like the Steelers and the Patriots and whatnot, you look at the teams that are the most consistently successful in the NFL for not just the last 5 years, but the last 10, 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. Those are some of those organizations at the top of the league, and sort of bringing that sort of stability. That's always been what Arthur Blank has wanted, to have that sort of stability of success, and bringing someone like Ian Cunningham, who's been in both organizations, that can take some of the lessons that he learned over those years in both of those organizations and apply them to Atlanta, I think is beneficial. And ultimately we'll see, how he executes. As you say, T, like, it looks great on paper. And ultimately, it's going to be not necessarily won and lost on the field for the general manager, but like won and lost in the booth, in the office, out on the practice field, out there in that room in the scouting combine. So those are the types of things that hopefully Ian Cunningham will deliver on them. But I think there's every reason to be optimistic that, the Falcons got this right.
Hey, I like it when Aaron is talking optimism. I really, really do, which brings me to my next question, Jarvis. We'll see if you are in that same space of optimism. As I mentioned, you've got the president of football, Matt Ryan, in place. You have the GM, general manager Ian Cunningham, in place. You have head coach Kevin Stefanski in place. So now that you have the three musketeers, the triumvirate, the trio in place, are you a lot excited, a little excited, or unenthused overall?
Yeah, you know what I started thinking about when Aaron was talking about Ian Cunningham and throwing a little shade at my comment about the Eagles and drafting Georgia players. You know what I'm saying? Hey, bro, I mean, come on, dog. Recency bias, bro. Come on,
sure.
Follow me here, dog. Like, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, I started thinking about, like, okay, the Falcons don't have a first round pick. I don't want to put too much stock into it. But I'm very interested to see where they go with that second round pick. I think that's going to tell me a lot about what he values as a general manager, because if you go out there and draft you see a wide receiver up there, sexy 4.3 speed, 6'2", 6'3", and all that stuff, and he drafted a wide receiver, like, okay. Oh my goodness. If you see a defensive tackle sitting up there, 6'3", about 325, stout against the run, take on double team blocks, and he messing around and draft a D tackle that can just plug. I'm talking about just plug and play, stopping that run on the first and second down. Like, we might be cooking with something, and because defensive linemen, offensive linemen are guys, or if he drafts a tackle, yeah, man, let's go. Like, I will see the vision, and that, because your foundation of your team will always and forever be offensive line, defensive line. And if he values that, that's one of the things where I look at him just like, man, that gets me excited, because I can't wait until the draft rolls around. I know we got a couple months, before he hits here, but that's where my mind immediately goes when they solidify the triumvirate. I like that word, T.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, and I agree with you on that one. And there's some consistency that would show you that, just in terms of how important the Chicago Bears were and how intentional they were about getting it right in the trenches. They were the ones who went out and got Joe Thuney. They were the ones who said, hey, Grady Jarrett, come up here. And Grady had a solid year. Joe Thuney did his thing. So there is an understanding like, yes, if Caleb Williams is to show himself as our franchise quarterback, if you will, let's make sure that we protect our franchise quarterback, right? And like
Ian Cunningham is a former offensive lineman as well.
Yes. And right. And for those of you who are not familiar, and I was about to get to that, for those of you who are not familiar with my favorite position group in all of football is the O-lineman, because they think differently.
Yeah, sure.
They're the thinkers. Those are my guys. Yes.
I'm quirky. Yes,
exactly. They're quirky thinkers. Yep.
Well,
I like quirky
as well.
Yes, I like quirky and I like thinkers. So it kind of works for me.
Yeah.
So
like big dudes, T.
Okay, not heavy on the big part. Not heavy on the big.
Okay,
so we're not going down that rabbit hole, are we?
No, we're not going down.
No, we're gonna say if we're going down a personal rabbit hole, that is Aaron. Like that, we're on the Aaron Freeman personal rabbit hole train these days, not the Tenitra one. Okay, so Aaron, you go ahead and save us, like you so often do, as our voice of reason, and just tell me if you are a lot excited, a little excited, or unenthused about this group.
You know, my personality is like I try not to get too hyped about things weeks and months in advance. So I'm a little excited, and you know, once they start making moves, once we get to like late February, March, April, you know, the draft, free agency, all that stuff, then depending on, as sort of picking up what Jarvis was saying about the football stuff, not the other stuff. You know, once they start making moves and we start seeing where their priorities lie, that's when I can get a lot more excited. But so at this point, I'm a little excited to see what they do. And as we get closer to that time period, that excitement might grow. And then ultimately, if they start making moves that I actually like, you know, what a time to be alive, you know, then we can get a lot more excited for this triumvirate, you know, moving forward.
I love it. Did Aaron just say, what a time to be alive? Like Aaron just said, what a time to be alive. So I will put a pin in that. And if we all get what we are wishing for, especially when it comes to free agency and the draft, we're circling back to this day that Aaron said it will be one where a time will be had, and what a time to be alive. But yeah, I would agree with you guys. I'm at this point, at least from what we've seen on paper of these three, I think it's a really good look, and I'm excited. And I think you should be. I think this is a time where Falcons fans should be optimistic. Like, don't be that fan who's like, yeah, but we always get it right or wrong, or we don't get it right in all three phases. Go ahead and be optimistic and be positive for where it looks like the Falcons are going right now. And think about this. The Falcons didn't just make moves in the top three spaces or the last one officially, right, in the last few days, but they've actually made a couple of moves that we want to talk about. So we'll give you guys our thoughts on those key ones when we take that under further review. This episode of our squad show is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And this week, Prize Picks has a special max discount for the big game live in the app right now. Drake May just needs one passing yard for the max discount to win. Add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in. So the social feeds feature, that's awesome. You can share lineups and even copy lineups from winners with one click. And you're going to love that you can follow Prize Picks partners like us and tail or fade picks right from the feed. And Prize Picks is super simple to use. Takes no time to get started. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So make sure you check out Prize Picks right after the squad show, because it's good to be right. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by Drip Drop. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? I mean, honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When you stay on top of it, your energy, your focus, your mood, they all level up. But let's be real, plain water, doesn't always cut it. I will tell you, not the girl with the plain water. But especially when you're grinding through long days, you're hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals, that's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clearer focus, better energy, elevated mood, even fresh skin glow. Anyway, if you've been using Drip Drop like I have, then you know it's a good part of your daily routine. And honestly, that's the game changer, not just for workouts, but every single day. And you're going to love that it uses a precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Drip Drop's also a science-backed formula that's trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top collagen pro teams, because it rehydrates you faster and more effectively than water alone. So right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. So go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Thank you guys for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So, Aaron, as I mentioned, the Falcons made more moves the last couple of days, not just the GM role, but several others that we want to talk about, want to get you guys' thoughts on. Let's start with Tanner Engstrand. Of course, he is now the Falcons' offensive passing game coordinator. What do you think about that hire?
Well, I remember talking with Locked On Jets host John Bushko during the season in the lead up to that game. Mm-hmm. And he didn't necessarily praise Tanner Engstrand's play calling and his usage of some of the key players on the Jets as highly as you would want to. But for the role that Tanner Engstrand's going to have, he's going to be the passing game coordinator. The last time he was a passing game coordinator, it was for a very successful Detroit Lions offense. Now, I think the bulk of that success was the Lions players and Ben Johnson, because we've seen the Lions still have success offensively without Tanner Engstrand and Ben Johnson. We've seen Ben Johnson have success in Chicago without Tanner Engstrand. So, Tanner Engstrand's a part of that, but it's hard to give him too much credit for the success of those Lions teams. But certainly bringing some of those elements of that Lions offense under Ben Johnson to this passing game, I think will be beneficial to the Falcons. We'll see how much it enhances the passing game, because I think that's going to be, really the challenge for this Falcon team. We know with a Kevin Stefanski offense that they'll be able to run the football. We know with the talent that the Falcons have at the running back position in Bijan Robinson, as well as this offensive line with Bill Callahan, that they should be able to run the football. The question for the Falcons moving forward is going to be, how effective is their passing game going to be? And Tanner Engstrand is going to be a big part of that. And when you just look at this last year in New York, it wasn't great. How much of that do you blame on Garrett Wilson getting injured? How much do you blame that on Justin Fields being limited as a quarterback? All those various things certainly play a factor in that. So I think this is a solid hire for the Falcons, but at this point in time, I think Tanner Engstrand has a lot to prove to see how much this moves the needle for this Falcons passing attack.
Yeah, and for you, Jarvis, what are your thoughts on Engstrand's hire as the Falcons passing game coordinator?
When I think about having a former offensive coordinator, I kind of go back to what we talked about with Ian Cunningham, when you working under guys and you kind of picking up certain things from guys who had a lot of success. And, now granted, when he got opportunity to call plays on his own, it's so hard to judge people who've been with within that Jets organization, because it's such a clusterfuffle. But when you look at what he's been able to do, operating under a guy who ultimately got a job because of how he called plays or how much success he had calling plays. I mean, you can just look at it as another piece to the puzzle, another brick to build around Michael Penix, because that's when you look at the importance of making this work. I think it's vital that you give him as many guys that he can as many guys you can lean on to kind of say, hey, I've been in this situation before. I understand what concepts could potentially work for you, and you build that relationship with your quarterback so he can have someone he can go to. A big mess was made of what he talked about in the press conference about essentially going to his girl when he's having who's his go-to, and he didn't name any coaches and people were up in arms. But, and I think that when you have that in a situation, kind of looking back on it, because when you was in it, you had to get some context, and it wasn't necessarily Mike was answering it because he was asked the question multiple times. But I do think it is some type of disconnect, or there was some type of disconnect with that offensive coaching staff because of the Zach Robinson situation and Ike Hilliard and Barry McLeod. It wasn't right. Something wasn't right. He had to get pulled down from the box because he wasn't getting the plays in. So there obviously is a disconnect. So when you have a guy like Tanner come in who's called plays before, ultimately it says that, hey, we want guys who have experience. There are a lot of experience in this group that they're surrounding Penix with, and ultimately you shouldn't have kerfuffles like that with all of this experience that you have in this quarterback / offensive play calling room.
Yeah. And Aaron, for you, at least with a little bit more of the verdict still out thought process around Tanner Engstrand, does it help you at all or give you a little bit more encouragement or optimism that the Falcons decided to bring back Robert Prince as a wide receivers coach, especially with that room potentially having a shakeup come this offseason?
Yeah, I think so. Robert Prince had a lot of success in Detroit with a lot of veteran wide receivers. And so, I think that's going to be, you're hoping that he'll continue having success with a veteran like Drake London moving forward, who will presumably be the anchor of the Falcons passing attack for the next, 5 to 7 years for this Falcon team. And then the question is going to be, what else do the Falcons add to that wide receiver room? Do they rely on the draft to sort of replenish that room? Do they go with the free agent pickups and try to get that immediate impact? And sort of that's going to be a big challenge for Robert Prince to, figure that whole thing out as the Falcons kind of revamp that wide receiver room around Drake London. And so I think because Prince has had a lot of success in the past, it does make you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that, going back to the whole where they go in that second round, hey, Mr. Prince, Coach Prince, can you work with somebody in the 5th or 6th round? Or do you need, he needs to be able to have a certain floor in order for you can come, in order for you to be able to work with him. And I'm not saying that's exactly how it's going to be framed, but when you look at what he's been able to do in Detroit, there's a lot of talented guys that they had, but those guys were, guys that Brad Holmes hit on. You got the Jameson Williams, obviously, first round pick, had some issues going on with him, but he's had some success. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, that guy working with those guys like that, he's had, some guys that he can work with. So I'll be interested to see what the priority is as far as filling positions. And I think Prince is going to be responsible for those guys coming in and have success. And you'll kind of get a good vibe as to how Ian feels about him, being able to apply what he's going to bring to the table to be able to level those guys up.
Yeah. I mean, you do look at their passing attack and look at some of the gems and the jewels that the Lions were able to get. And yeah, I mean, you kind of hope for the same for this offense as well, and this Falcons offense. And then when you look at arguably the most important position, you guys kind of both threw out there, but you're looking at the position of quarterback. So who's going to help to bring Michael Penix Jr. along, not just in the offseason when he's getting himself back into playing condition, but throughout the course of the season as you look for him to show himself, hopefully, as a franchise quarterback. So the Falcons decided, hey, we'll go with Alex Van Pelt as a quarterback's coach. What do you think about that move, Free, and how important that could be for MPX?
Well, Alex Van Pelt is a good coach because he went to the University of Pittsburgh, the greatest institution on the planet. But, I think
Dan Marino's record too. Yeah.
So I think Van Pelt's had a lot of success. He's been around a lot of good quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers won an MVP, one of several MVPs that he won. And I think the thing that, doing more research on Alex Van Pelt that he is well known for is his ability to get guys to sell ball fakes on play action passes. And that was something that Michael Penix was terrible at last year, where we would see him, operating out of the pistol and doing like pirouettes and stuff like that, trying to fake these
ball fakes in my mouth. Free, don't do that.
And so it's like, hopefully, like at the bare minimum, if Alex Van Pelt can sell that part of the offense and get Michael Penix to figure that stuff out, that will do wonders, I think, for the Falcons' play action passing attack moving forward. So I think Alex Van Pelt can help Michael Penix in the major area of weakness. And if he can figure that out and then hopefully figure out some of the other things that go along with playing the quarterback level, I think that this is one of the better hires the Falcons have made.
Yeah, and Jarvis, it looks like you'd give a thumbs up to Van Pelt as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you think about, like, he also worked with the Browns. He was offensive coordinator with the Browns when they went to the playoffs, with Baker Mayfield. He had Baker Mayfield, doing what he was supposed to do. And it was unfortunate that it came from the top down that Stefanski had to fire Van Pelt. So, Stefanski was a lot of things that happened, not everything, but there were some things that happened up there that were kind of out of his control. And when you think about having success, going to the playoffs twice, when he was the play caller, and then ultimately having to fire him, and you see what happened after they fired him. It just all went to So you could tell that Van Pelt had some type of effect on not being there. And for Stefanski to bring him back, that kind of lets you know the type of relationship they had.
Yeah.
Hey, man, it wasn't no, hey, I fired you. Hey, come on back and help me out. It was like, hey, man, you know what the situation was up there. Now come on back so we can get Michael Penix right. And you can have a quarterback that can, be with you for the next 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, and it goes without saying, and of course we'll just go over this real quick, but it is important to have that right director of scouting as well, because you've got to evaluate that talent for that in the upcoming draft. And like you said, Jarvis, like you said, Aaron, with minimal opportunity in terms of where you're selecting draft picks, you got to hit right. So the Falcons, Aaron, are going with the promotion of Tumbo Abenaconda for their director of scouting. And I think that position, although it may not seem like one that's front and center, and it's not, most fans don't know, but that director of scouting is an important role as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a key part of the process of managing all the different scouts in the building. Mm-hmm. And, it's also a stepping stone to being a general manager down the road, right? To where you go from a area scout to a national scout to a director of scouting to, some type of VP of personnel that they come up with a fancy title for you to in that next step. And then it's the assistant GM. And then all of a sudden you're the GM. And so I think this is important for Mr. Abenaconda, in his own personal career, but also it has a potential ramifications, as you said, T, for this team's ability to draft well moving forward.
Yeah. You're talking about a guy, talking about sustainability, vision for the future. This guy's been here since 2012. Yeah. And scouting is not for the weak. Long hours, lots of travel. And you're ultimately the guys that you go to that table and vouch for when everyone is sitting up in that room on draft day. Like, hey man, this is the guy, this is my guy. It lets you know that he's had success along the way for a new regime, coaching staff, general manager to come in and they say, oh, okay, y'all want to promote him to director? Cool, that's fine. That makes sense. And that means they've done their research on what his track record was. So yeah, I love to see things like this when guys get the opportunity to kind of upgrade, so to speak.
Indeed, indeed. Now, the college football all-star games got underway with the Senior Bowl this weekend, and the guys were out last week for Senior Bowl. We'll talk a little bit about who impressed next up. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communication. So because when your team is reachable, organized, and communication in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. You're going to love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal, and it works right from your phone or computer. And you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise, Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operations to growing teams. So make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. So, Jarvis, we talked a little bit about this last week. Obviously, you guys braved the nasty weather for Senior Bowl week and really had some players that impressed you. And, of course, the Senior Bowl was this past weekend. So just kind of wanted to go back to those players, but also just talk a little bit about who may have impressed you, or surprisingly impressed you, or I don't know, maybe someone even overwhelmed you or made you kind of scratch your head. But, Jarvis, you had said that you were impressed by one of the defensive tackles, or two defensive tackles, actually, Tim Keenan from Alabama and Zane Durant from Penn State. So just wanted to go back and ask if there were any other things that you saw out of them that impressed you in the actual game, or when you wrapped up the week, did you say, hey, these are some guys that the Falcons need to take a look at?
Yeah, Tim Keenan continued to be consistent, right? Like, especially when it comes to stopping the run and taking on those double teams and sinking those hips and anchoring down. Like, hey, man, you go have to stay on me, because a lot of times how quickly that guard is able to get up to the next level determines whether or not you did your job or not. And if that tackle has to kind of stick with you because you're starting to split that, you're trying to start to get skinny, try to get in between that double team and get upfield and get that TFL, that's what I feel like Keenan was able to do throughout the week. Zane Durant impressed me tremendously in one-on-ones. With the going up against that guard and being able to get off the rock, and another guy that I always how I am, T. I kind of gravitate towards interior defensive lineman. I don't know why, just me. There was another guy that really stood out to me, a guy by the name of Grayson Holton. He's a defensive tackle out of oh my gosh, my notes here.
Oklahoma,
yes. He was wrecking shop, like just being a disruptor, whether it be coming off the ball in the pass or the run. He was just causing a lot of havoc down there, and those are the type of guys that you need, especially on this defense, because it was not good with all of the sack records and all that stuff. This team was not good at stopping the run, and I think that Matt made it a point to point that out. Hey, we want to be able to stop the run. So I think it's going to be priority to get a big boy up in that middle, and so he can kind of hold everything down while James Pierce and Jalen Walker, they come in on 3rd and long and then sack the quarterback. But it starts with stopping the run before you get there.
Yeah. And what about for you, Aaron? I know that some of the guys that you mentioned that you were impressed with kind of going in another direction of need for the Falcons was wide receiver Tyron Montgomery out of John Carroll University, and a couple of corners, Colton Hood out of Tennessee, Chris Johnson from San Diego State. Were you impressed by their performances in the game? But also, were there any additional players that, as you wrapped up your Senior Bowl week, you were impressed by?
Yeah, there was a lot of wide receivers that I thought that basically, and the way the Senior Bowl is structured with the one-on-ones, it favors the wide receivers. So you're usually going to come out of the week liking more wide receivers than you like the cornerbacks, just based off of that. Just because it's so stacked against the cornerbacks in that way. And so there was a lot of wide receivers that I went into the week watching, guys like Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame, Jacoby Lane out of USC, among some others that I was impressed by. But there was a lot more guys that I hadn't necessarily done the work on prior to the Senior Bowl that continuously popped throughout the week. Kevin Coleman out of Missouri, Tyron Montgomery, I thought, as we talked about on one of those squad shows, sort of coming from that D3 school in John Carroll and basically being a basketball player that just started playing football like 3 years ago, to show out to the degree that he showed out this week at the Senior Bowl. You would have assumed, oh, this guy's been playing football since he was like 9 years old or whatever, beating some of these corners and whatnot. And so, another corner I really liked was Chandler Rivers out of Duke. But like a lot of guys in that secondary, Bud Clark, the sort of nickel safety from TCU, had a good week. So there was a lot of guys that I think really emerged that, I'm going to have to circle back to get back to their film to see if it matches up with, some of the hype of the practice. Because sometimes you see guys like, oh yeah, this is a 5th round player when you watch the film, and then they show out for the Senior Bowl. And like, I know from my past where it's just like, you can't overrate too much of the Senior Bowl stuff when it comes to, like I remember in past years where Jarvis may remember the Northwestern D tackle out of Barrier or whatever. And, there was a lot of hype about him being like a 1st round pick or whatever. And I was like, he's good, but like, I don't see a 1st round player. And then he went in the 4th round and he's been a solid NFL player, but like, that's more in line with what he is. But the Senior Bowl leads to like, particularly this week or two before the combine, where people are like, oh, this guy's a 1st round guy. And so I say all that just to like, you have to find that balance of like, how much do I evaluate the film? How much do I evaluate these 3 days of practice? And it's going to be interesting to sort of go back being impressed by the guys in practice without watching the film to sort of calibrate that, rather than normally where I'm just like, okay, you base it off the film and then the practice can kind of move it up a little bit up or down. So I'm looking forward to that, but there's a lot of guys on my list at the wide receiver and cornerback positions that I'll be going back to.
Yeah, and Jarvis, Aaron makes a great point about the fact that there are a lot of guys who can impress just because of the way Senior Week is kind of set up, or Senior Bowl is kind of set up. But were there any guys where you said, you scratched your head, maybe you thought about what their potential was, but when you got there, you're like, I'm not so sure about this guy and whether he'll fit with the Falcons?
Can I say all the quarterbacks? No.
So you didn't see any QB2s out there, in other words?
No, not so much. For me, like I think Aaron made a great point, because a lot of times when you have people who aren't necessarily down there, and they're kind of looking at highlights, whatever NFL Network puts on there, and then they're watching the game, and then they're kind of getting a good assessment. I'm not saying that it's not going to give you a good idea what type of player they are in that particular environment, because that's what it's all about. How can guys perform when they're dropped in this little bucket of pool of talent? Can they shine in these talented group? Because Senior Bowl gets very talented players. That's why it's so popular. And I think that when you look at how Garrett Nussmeier played in the game, you're like, oh, okay, he must have had a good week. But Aaron, we were sitting there in that last practice on Thursday, like the man couldn't complete a pass down the field. It was just check down Charlie. They were going through the 2-minute drill, 11 on 11. Hey man, get us down in the end zone, and they just couldn't do anything. He ended up completing the pass on the last play of practice, and you saw him all fired up. Yeah, we go. And then he goes out in the game and has a good game. Everybody was like, oh yeah, Garrett Nussmeier, he's the name to watch. No, he's not. Like, look at what he does most of the time, and that's probably the type of player that he's going to be, or that's his floor, right? And his floor is just too low for me, T. I can't sit up here. Now, if you're asking me if he's sitting there in the 4th or 5th round, maybe, but like I'm not as high on Garrett Nussmeier as a lot of folks are because, like you said, like you have to take everything into the equation. I got a chance to watch this man for 3 straight days, and I'm not gonna sit up here and just erase all that out of my mind and just look at the game. Oh yeah, he was a gamer. No, it's different when you get to the NFL on the NFL level.
Now, for me, T, speaking of quarterbacks, shout out to my guy Taylor Green out of Arkansas, because like I don't want to sit here and be like pouring salt on this man's dreams of playing in the NFL, but Jarvis can vouch for me. He can back me up on this. It was a rough week for Taylor Green, right? I think part of the reason why there's been so much Garrett Nussmeier hype is not because Garrett Nussmeier had a great week of practice. He was fine during the week of practice. I've seen worse quarterbacks. I've seen much better quarterbacks over these last 4 years at the Senior Bowl. But relative to the other quarterbacks on the American team, he was light years better than some of these guys. And, I watched a little bit of the game on Saturday, and I caught the part when Taylor Green came in the game, and I was just like, there was like a rollout that he had, and he like missed the wide receiver by like 10 feet, open wide receiver, and it was just like, yeah, that perfectly summarizes the Taylor Green practice week of just like not being able to complete simple things. And again, Taylor, I wish you the best, my guy, but I don't know if being an NFL quarterback is in your future. You're a really good athlete, you got really good size, take a page from a former Arkansas quarterback by the name of Felipe Franks, who made the switch from quarterback to tight end. I think that might benefit you in the long run. But hey, that's me. That's just one man's opinion. You live out your dreams. But yeah, it was a rough week for quarterbacks. Just you didn't see, and I think that's going to be the story of this draft, where it's just like it's Fernando Mendoza, and that's about
everybody else.
Yeah, and so everybody's going to be like, we'll wait till 2027 before us to get a quarterback. Yeah. So I think that's going to be one of these drafts this year, and I think the Senior Bowl will kind of exemplified that.
Well, you know what? I tell you, the team that has the number 1 pick, that's the Raiders, right?
Yeah.
So guess what? The Raiders are in a really nice position. Like, they do need a quarterback. Not saying that they don't need a quarterback, but real talk, since he might be Fernando Mendoza, the only one out there that looks like he's worth drafting. If you're a team in need of a QB this year, maybe everybody's calling Vegas.
Hey, I heard this Kirk Cousins guy might be available, so you might be interested in sniffing around him. So,
hello, yeah. I mean, real talk. They could absolutely take him, and that way they can just pawn off their number 1 pick and see what they can get for it. Hey, that's what their front office needs to get to work to do. Luckily, hopefully, the Falcons won't have to pay attention or do anything that even remotely looks like that, because hopefully their QB1 will be good to go. And hopefully they can find themselves a QB2. Not in this draft, however, not in this draft. Now, Ra has returned to some familiar surroundings, so we'll download on that in the look ahead. This episode of our squad show is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. So pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and you'll have tickets locked in within minutes. You'll love seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and being able to see the view from the seat before buying makes the decision easy. And zone deals, they'll stand out for you because you can choose the section. Game Time will pick the seats for you, and you save. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. gametime.co. So, Jarvis, Aaron, one of my favorite words, as you all now have figured out, is triumvirate. So the former triumvirate, I'm going to say coaching wise for the Falcons, everybody has finally found a landing place. So obviously Jeff Ulbrich didn't have to go far. retained his job as the Falcons defensive coordinator. We know that Zach Robinson is a little further down south now, the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Sunday, we got the news that the 49ers hired Raheem Morris as their new defensive coordinator. Now, of course, he was considered a finalist for the Cardinals head coaching job that ultimately went to Rams OC Mike LaFleur, which now means the NFL is over for new black coaches. But Ra was definitely in the running for that gig in Arizona. But hey, now he's back with Kyle Shanahan. You know, they have a relationship from their stops with the Bucs, the now Commanders, and of course the Falcons back in 2015, 2016. Aaron, when you look at this opportunity for Raheem Morris, are you at all surprised this is where and how Ra landed?
I'm not surprised that, you know, Kyle Shanahan and Raheem Morris linked back up, because their coaching relationship goes back even further than with the Commanders. It goes back to those John Gruden Buccaneers teams from 20 plus years ago, where that was where Kyle Shanahan got his start in coaching. That's where Raheem got his start in coaching as an NFL coach after spending time with Dan Quinn and Hofstra. But like, it's not surprised that, you know, like we said at the top, it's a who you know business, and you often bring in coaches that you're very familiar with, and they have a long friendship and working relationship.
Yes.
I just question the fit, because the style of defense that Kyle Shanahan has consistently wanted to play with was what Robert Saleh and what Jeff Ulbrich brought to the table: 4-man fronts. Let's, you know, play more of that 4-3. Let's win with our D line to control the line of scrimmage. And, you know, that's not really Raheem's style of defense. That the influence that Raheem brought to the table when you sort of hybridized this Jeff Ulbrich defense with his defense was, let's get more 5-man fronts, that 3-4 sort of base defense. Let's play more coverage. Let's play more, you know, zone and all that stuff. And so it's not the same, but it's kind of reminiscent of these last couple of years where Kyle Shanahan hasn't had Robert Saleh, where he had Brandon Staley 2 years ago, where he had Steve Wilkes 3-4 years ago, whenever that was, when they went to the Super Bowl, and it didn't quite work. And so, like, I think Raheem and Kyle have a close enough relationship where they'll figure it out. They'll be fine. But at the same time, I do wonder if the style of defense that Raheem traditionally likes to play with is really going to mesh with what Kyle Shanahan wants to do moving forward. We've seen it with Steve Wilkes, where it's like, if you ain't marching to the beat of Kyle Shanahan's drum, you're up out of there, you know? Yeah. So I don't think he'll do Raheem like that, you know, just because they have that long-standing friendship. But you do wonder a little bit if like, it feels like Raheem is going to have to do a lot more adjusting to what Kyle's going to do than necessarily Kyle's going to be like, hey, Raheem, come in and do whatever you want to do. So I question the fit a little bit, but we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, Jarvis, that's a great point, because on paper, as we talked about, they go back decades. Bucks, Commanders, Falcons, all of those connection points between the two. But to Aaron's point, that doesn't always mean it's a perfect fit. So are you surprised by Ra landing as the 49ers defensive coordinator?
No, I think it's strategic, right? Because we know they still got a little change coming in for a few more years, you know, from AB. And of course, you know how it works. You're probably going to get supplemented, you know, like, hey, whatever my salary, hey, man, yeah, I work for free. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got a big boy check coming from AB. So, you know, Kyle, you know, yeah, throw me a little something, man. Throw me a little play money. You know, we can work this thing out. But seriously, though, I think it is very strategic. When you look at the defensive coordinators, got D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh, those guys that got into those positions were able to turn that into, you know, head coaching gigs, right? Saleh was able to do it twice, right? You know, so when you look at what he brings to the table, he had success as a defensive coordinator with the Rams and won a Super Bowl. Yes, absolutely. I know people kind of want to forget about that because of the failures as a head coach, right? Mm-hmm. And even that's kind of up for discussion when you look at it, you know, like dig into it. But I think ultimately this is a strategic move by Ra, saying, you know, seemingly wants to, you know, get over to San Fran, you know, have some success and potentially have his name back in conversation to be another head coach. Or he can kind of go over there and say, man, like, let's get a bowl. Let me get another Super Bowl as defense coordinator and kind of let's see how it goes. Because, you know, initially when, you know, he got let go here, there were rumors of him flying around, or he's doing television. They want to kind of take a year off and kind of go that route. And I feel like this move is not only strategic, but it kind of shows that Ross still got that fire. He still want to prove something.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, he could turn into a Dick LeBeau, right? Where Dick LeBeau didn't have a lot of success as a head coach, but he found himself to be one of the premier defensive coordinators ever to coach the game and rode that right into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So who knows, that it could be an opportunity for Raheem Morris to show that, hey, he's one of those guys who could potentially be that type of defensive coordinator, or if the reports were accurate and he actually is considered or was considered strongly as a finalist for that Arizona Cardinals position, then who knows, maybe he'll get Act 3 as a head coach. I mean, one never knows how these things might play out. But in the meantime, maybe if nothing else, maybe not the best fit, but maybe a nice soft landing for him to be able to be with someone who trusts him and someone whom he trusts as well. Now, what we may not trust is the Pro Bowl games and what that looks like, but it's upon us. 7-on-7 is what the focus is with the flag football game, especially important as the Olympics are en route in 2028, and flag football is going to be introduced for that particular Olympics. Of course, you also have the skills challenges, but the game is shifted to Tuesday. So I ask Aaron, other than Bijan Robinson and Chris Lindstrom being there, so obviously we're going to watch just because those guys are in it, but is there really anything else exciting to you about these Pro Bowl games?
Speak for yourself, T, in terms of who's going to watch. I haven't watched a Pro Bowl game in like 12 years. I mean, no, I mean, it's like, to me, the Pro Bowl is like, it's an honor to be here.
Yes.
And then like, that's kind of all it is. It's at this point in time. Like, I know the NFL is trying to make it a thing and trying to make it watchable and trying to do all the things that they've been doing these last couple of years, revamping it and changing it up, and good on you, NFL. But I know for me, it's just like, I don't care about any of that. Like, the last time that I was really interested in what they were doing at the Pro Bowl, they used to have the QB skills challenge way back in the day in the 90s.
Went back old school with it.
Yeah, and like that to me was like a cool thing that they did. And like, other than like bringing that back, and not just having the 6 Pro Bowl quarterbacks do that, like, let's get like the top 12 quarterbacks in the league, in a spot and see like who has the best skills. I remember watching in those days where they did it, where Randall Cunningham had like the greatest arm in the league when they were doing that stuff, and like when Drew Brees did it a couple of years, and he was like the most accurate quarterback on some of those things. And so like, those are the things I want to find out. Like, okay, let's get Josh Allen and Justin Herbert and Michael Penix on a field together, and let's find out who's got the best arm in the league, and who's the most accurate quarterback and all that sort of stuff. So like, other than that, like, it's like, whatever, man. Like, y'all do what y'all gonna do. Enjoy it. Players enjoy it. The people that enjoy that stuff, do you enjoy it? Not saying, but me, it ain't for me. So it's like, whatever, sure. Tuesday, okay. Maybe I'll turn it on in the background as I'm cleaning up the house or something like that. But other than that, I don't care.
Yeah, a Tuesday, no doubt. So we were supposed to tune into that, Jarvis, and be excited about it on a Tuesday.
No, I mean, they moved it to Tuesday because they knew nobody was going to watch on Sunday, because it used to be on Sunday. And all the Pro Bowl, when they were still in pads, but they weren't playing football, they were playing flag football in pads, like, all it was the conversations were centered around, man, this is trash. What are they doing? You just got guys kind of loafing off the ball and all that stuff. Nobody's playing hard or anything like that, which you kind of understand. But the guys used to play hard back in the day. I will never forget when Sean Taylor knocked the out of doggone Brian Mormon. That punter, man, he knocked the crap out of that man. I would never forget that. That's like one of those Pro Bowl moments where he's just like, look, man, that is awesome. Like, he's out there. Sean Taylor was full tilt, baby. It wasn't no such thing as powering down, just go out there and run up and thump, and just kind of, and going about your business. Guys weren't built like that, So, and then I'm like Aaron too. I love the Pro Bowl games. Like when they had the strongest man competition, Larry Allen, big behind, went out there and hit 225, 40. Yeah, 43 times. Like that was an absolute crazy man. The man squatted 900 pounds. He benched 700 pounds. He was just absolute maniac. It's unreal. Like I used to love that stuff. So, and that may be kind of like what we dealing with the whole All-Star game in the NBA, and you can't get guys.
Oh, no doubt.
The dunk contest. Nobody wants to compete and see who's the best. Like people not really interested in that. I'm out here getting mine. I'm getting my money. I'm at the Pro Bowl. I'm cool on that, bro. I'm good. I know I'm a really good football player or whatever. So, maybe that's one of the reasons why it went away. But yeah, this whole Tuesday night running around in flags and Bijan, God bless him, man. Love that man to death. Talented as all get out. One of the best players I've probably seen at the running back position. I've seen a lot of them. But, out there, y'all come watch me, like, nah, bro. Like, I love watching Bijan play, but I'm like, Aaron, I ain't about to be out here like, we got to lock in for this Pro Bowl flag football game on a Tuesday night. Nah, man, I'm going to put my daughters to bed. I'm going to read them a book, and then y'all have fun with that.
Indeed. Well, you know what? That just means that the NFL has to go back to the lab. The NBA just keeps trying, and they have yet to figure it out. No matter what they do, in my opinion, they've still not figured it out for All-Star Weekend, the All-Star Game. I feel like the NFL is the same way. I think everybody probably needs to take a page from the NHL, because I feel like with their foreign nations that they did last year, it was a hit. And so Gary Bettman, their commissioner, it seems like they finally figured it out. And I think Major League Baseball, to me, they have one of the best All-Star Weekend, All-Star type breaks out there. Low key, if you know, the WNBA figured it out a couple years ago. So maybe the NBA needs to have a conversation with their sister league, because their All-Star Weekend it's right. They've got the formula. But yeah, NFL, I'm not sure what to tell you, but you still got some work to do. You got to get back to the lab. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcon Squad show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. The Falcon Squad show and Locked on Falcons are part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll see you next time.